Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a pre-show post-edit. In going through and editing this episode, I found that we ended up having about 3.5 hours worth of content. Although this is evidence of how deep of a conversation I was able to have, 3.5 hours is a bit much by my own standards for one single episode. As such, I've decided to cut up this interview I've had with this guest into 3 parts. The first part, which you'll be listening to today, will be about an hour long. Part 2, which contains a lot more of the meat and potatoes, will be about 2.5 hours. And finally, we'll round off with the remainder with part 3. Each segment will be released within 1 week of each other so that you don't get too overburdened with too much content. I'll admit this is the first time I'm trying such a tactic, but we'll see how it goes. Without further ado, here's episode 14, part 1. Enjoy. Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Elder Scrolls Spotlight, a podcast about roleplay and role-playing inside the Elder Scrolls Online MMO-RPG. As always, I'm your host, Mikey, your friendly neighborhood commentator. Tonight, we'll be having a conversation with a true blue... Well, actually, that might not be the right analogy to use in this situation. Tonight, we'll be having a conversation with a mellow yellow fellow. Yeah, it seems more appropriate. Anyway, he's an RPer from the Dominion side of things. He's a long-time player, having been posting around since 2014 on the ESO-RP forums. He plays the Magister of the Merithic Eye and the Prince of Solstice, Sarinteal Raliagel and Barlaysamir of Solstice. I honestly think I'll enjoy this episode because this will be my first time speaking with an authentic Altmer roleplayer. And in this episode, I hope to learn a few things about the Altmer and the Altmeri Dominion, and as always, broaden my horizon with this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have Sarinteal with us, and I hope you enjoy this episode. I know I will. So, welcome to the show. God help you.
Thank you. Yes. I'm really sorry. I phased out for a moment. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let's just jump right into it, shall we? Where are you from? How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 25, and I'm from the northwest UK, kind of nestled around the ever sunny Windermere, Lake Windermere and the Lake District, where we get the best sun 3 months of the year.
Native British folk might understand this to be a rare form of sarcasm that is native to that side of Britain, I would imagine.
Yes. Well, over here we have something called the weather rock, and it's a rock that's tied to a vertical and horizontal beam. It's just like a gallows, and from it is dangling a rock, and behind it is a plaque that says, if the rock is wet on the top, it's raining. If I forgot, what is it? If the rock is dry, then it's not raining. If the rock is gone, there's a hurricane.
That is a very sound weather device. I think that we should probably have something of our own like that down here. I know that we'd save a lot of time here in Florida, especially since we get hit by hurricanes too. And that's always lovely.
Oh, we never get hit by hurricanes. we just get a consistent mild drizzle.
Does it ever get demoralizing after a while? Do you guys ever get something like seasonal depression from all that rain? This is like a genuine question. I wonder.
Every day. It's and I wouldn't even call it a seasonal depression since it's constant.
Okay, that explains the majority of the behavior I've witnessed here so far. But moving on then, how did you get into video games?
I don't exactly remember the first instance. All I remember is my father worked from home pretty much, his entire career, or ever since I was born. And so we've always had a computer available in the house 24/7. And on it, there was just a demo of Sonic the Hedgehog, the original PC, obviously, and Age of Empires. So those are the games that I kind of weaned myself on.
Okay, and what is your favorite video game?
Hello Kitty Island Adventure. It's a rip-roaring good time.
Is it true that Butters still plays that game?
Every day. We raid together.
Is it true that he's an asshole?
He can't heal for shit.
Oh, that explains a lot. Dang it. Well, moving on then. How did you first get into MMOs?
World of Warcraft. Yeah, it started with World of Warcraft. Although, I guess beforehand, Habbo Hotel was my first MMO. I don't regret a moment in it.
You're not the first person to tell me Habbo Hotel was their first MMO. In fact, had a previous guest by the name of Shadow HVO, fellow from Denmark, who said that was his first one. It makes me wonder if Habbo Hotel was more marketed to the European folk as opposed to the NA landmass, because that's the 2 for 2. I don't know any other Americans that have played Habbo Hotel, actually.
Oh. Well, to this day, whenever I meet a new role player in The Elder Scrolls Online, I always ask age, sex, location, because that's all that matters. And if they say, I don't know, 19, female, and UK, I walk away because they're probably lying.
Okay. Well, I guess I lied to you then, because I am from the UK. He just didn't know it. No, I'm kidding. That's not true, actually.
Wait, you're not female?
So, are there any video games on the horizon that you're looking forward to?
Dark Souls Remastered would be one of them. Because to answer your earlier question, Dark Souls is probably my favorite game. I picked it up at a time where I was severely disillusioned with the idea of continuing video games as a hobby.
Severely disillusioned with the ideas of video games as a hobby.
Yeah, well, I wasn't really getting any kind of... I wasn't getting the right kind of enjoyment from it. I wouldn't say it was an addiction. I'd say it was more of like an obligation. Where I play video games. That's what I do as a hobby. So I guess I'll play video games. But none of these are really doing it for me. And then for £3, I picked up Dark Souls, and it had me absolutely just enthralled for an entire year. And this was a few years after everybody else raved about how good it was.
Okay. And is it the story of Dark Souls, the lore of Dark Souls, or the gameplay of Dark Souls that dragged you back into it?
Everything that you said, but in reverse order. So first it was obviously the gameplay, and then I got snippets of lore, and then everybody knows it by now that the story of Dark Souls is told through ostentatious cinematics at the start, but kind of obscure at the same time. They were kind of, on surface level, quite generic cinematics that are then kind of expanded by all these little descriptions that you find in items, from kind of esoteric comments from characters you pass on your travels and whatnot. So it's just one followed the other, and it was just kind of a natural progression of interest that really captured me, and still captures me. I mean, Dark Souls 3 came out last year and effectively concluded the whole thing. It wrapped it up. But Dark Souls 1 is almost like an island unto itself. You can just play Dark Souls 1, and that is all you need. There's no sequel baiting. There's nothing superfluous about it. You don't need to know anything else apart from what the first game tells you. And I like
It's
that.
interesting because the video game director for the first one once said in an interview that a good story tells itself. And I think you can see that within the worlds, because it takes a lot of detective work to sort of really understand how one thing got to another or something of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I just watched VatiVidia's videos on YouTube, and he told me what to think, and I listened.
Because VatiVidia he certainly does his homework. You got to give him credit for that.
Oh
Very,
yeah.
very thorough. He also did Bloodborne as well, but he took Bloodborne in a bit of a different direction and like explored some of the just really sad stories in Bloodborne, which I didn't really get until I played the game for myself, and some tears were shed.
Well, the best thing about the games is the atmosphere. You don't get that pervading sense of sadness by just watching the videos. You have to have walked through these lands that he's describing and seen these stories, and like I think his videos build upon the fact that you didn't know the full story before he told you it. That's another sad thing. You're like, holy shit, I missed that. That makes it all the sadder because loads of other people will miss it as well, and it's effectively a sad story that's forgotten.
It's I do agree with you there. It is one of melancholy, which makes me wonder what sort of place the developers were coming from as they were working on the game, and how many happy pills they must have been taking in order to get through the development cycle, because dear lord, does it get a little dark every now and again.
It really does. It really does. My favorite part of the first game is it New Londo? Ooh, it's the sunken city with the kings. Is it the 4 kings or the 3 kings? That environment. New Londo ruins. Yeah, it is New Londo. So it's where like the dark graves come from, and it's just a sad place that just got so corrupted by the people who ruled it that they just I don't know who they were, but they just had to drown it. They had to just drown it all to keep it sealed. And you effectively come along and you unseal it. And yeah, I don't have anything to add about it. It's just probably my favorite zone.
So after you were done playing with Dark Souls, you found your love for video games revitalized? Would that be safe to say?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I because it came around. It kick-started again the roguelike genre, I suppose. And I find myself really attracted to those kinds of games. And effectively, I've played stuff like FTL, Dungeon of the Endless, not stuff like Shovel Knight or no, it's not Shovel Knight. Is it Rogue Legacy? Rogue Legacy? Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
A lot of my favorite games lately have just been roguelikes, and it's kind of stems from Dark Souls.
I see. So I would say that Dark Souls was a seminal game in your video gaming history, in that it kind of started steering you towards a trope of video game, not a trope, but a trend of video games that you just find enjoyable. Would that be safe to say?
Yeah. And it reminded me of a lot of old games that I used to play as a child. And back then, I couldn't really put my finger on exactly what it was that I liked about them, but they shared so much in common with Dark Souls that it's very fun to just reminisce and just see what kind of effects that has on me. Sorry, the cat's just come along and started kneading. Sorry. Right, focusing again.
I can understand where you're coming from, but going back to MMOs, where did RP start for you then?
Arguably, it started right away. I started on a PvE server on the EU called Molten Core.
We're still going back. This is World of Warcraft we're talking about.
This is World of Warcraft, yeah.
Okay.
And even back then, I like to imagine that my human paladin was a character going through the world and learning and doing this and doing that, and treat my avatar as if it was just a character that was traveling through the world, and I was taking all the stories. I was never one to really use in like the early noughties the same kind of text speak. I never really used text speak, so like using you or THX thanks and shit like that. So that alone kind of, because that was never something that a paladin would ever do. He would never whip out his phone and text XXX to Sally Whitemane.
Like a paladin walking up to you and say, "Hey, baby," or "K, thanks, bye."
Yeah.
That'd be a little jarring, I would imagine.
So from the beginning, yeah, in a very basic sense, I was role playing. I was even role playing in Warcraft 3 when I was playing that. Like all these in the custom mode when you could create a hero and it'd come out with a randomly generated name. I'd get attached to that character for the playtime. And as I'm playing it, I'm imagining in my head these so much cooler scenarios than are taking place on the screen. But it was only with the release of the Burning Crusade, the first World of Warcraft expansion, that I actually started role playing, and I had taken about 2 years break from World of Warcraft, and I was out on a hike. I was down in fuck knows. I was on a hill, and I just kind of thought to myself, you know what, I want to play World of Warcraft right now. And about 2 months later, I got home and I stuck on the PC and I downloaded the latest expansion, and I rolled a Blood Elf, and I landed on a roleplay server, not knowing exactly what it was, and I was lucky enough within the first hour of loading into this server called the Shatar EU to somebody just immediately took me under their wing and told me about the etiquette of roleplay and like what it was, and I just took it on board and I kept going from there. It was just a very gradual growth in terms of learning how to roleplay.
So when you talk to me about how you met this person that took you under their wing, who was it? Who are they?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't have a clue. I remember meeting him maybe a year or two later, and I just looked at him and I'm like, oh shit, you're a pretty bad role player, man. you can't type for shit. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're metagaming, but at the time, yes, I was still grateful to him for showing it to me, and today I would not say that he is a bad role player, because he is a fantastic advocate or ambassador for the community. That he would just like bump into some random nobody in World of Warcraft in Middle of Quell for Less and just start talking to them about roleplay and spending up to an hour, 2 hours just talking it through with them and then sending them on the way. It was it was just very kind, I suppose.
I would say that every community needs more of those types of players. In my opinion, the RP communities have always been very welcoming, but a fault, in my opinion, is that they were never good at outreach, if that makes sense.
No, well, I mean, in a sense, that's a pitfall of a community whose predominant player base are, let's admit it, they're socially awkward, or at least
Sure.
their origins are of a socially awkward individual. Sometimes they come from acting backgrounds or this or that, but for the majority of the time, you're looking at people who like the books, who like the history, who like swords and dragons, and some of them just want to get their end off with a those kind of people aren't going to be your PR agents, and it's probably for the best to allow people to step into the environment, to be told the general direction in which you should probably walk, and just kind of shoving you in that direction, seeing what happens. It's not exactly survival of the fittest, it's kind of survival of the most adaptable and eager. On top of that, I think the people who don't do that stem from a different corner of the community. That they come from more of an artistic background. They come from they like their acting, and they like their histrionics of it all, and they like the attention. It comes from a general chat room environment.
I can understand that, and I agree with that to a certain extent. But I am of the belief that if there was a bit more of an outreach, perhaps roleplay itself would not be such a as offensive as this may seem to some people. It's very much a minority activity that people do. Most folks either do PvP or PvE, no matter how you look at the metrics of it.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice if roleplay had a bit more of a bigger stake in the formation of games or within the community, so that anything like the need for speech bubbles or an interactive environment to allow sitting in chairs or something of that nature to happen. Lord knows that you'd have that on other games, or that would occur in games faster. But instead, it takes them, at least using Guild Wars 2 as an example, it takes them at least 2-3 years for them to even consider that. Oh yeah, sitting in chairs. I guess some players like to do that.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings us to ESO, which was the least user-friendly MMO I've ever come across at launch. It was a bag of shit. It was a bag of shit, and really, it's been so difficult for the game to shed that initial disappointment. You go into Elder Scrolls and you're like, this is a roleplay game, and I will roleplay in it. I'm going to be the Dragonborn. My name is Martin Septin. I am going to be.
We just jumped right into the game, so that's thank you for that segue. Walking into Elder Scrolls Online, what were your expectations for it? Obviously, were you looking at Skyrim Online? Were you aware of the fact that some of the quality might be diminished because it's an MMO? What did you think?
The idea that it would be Skyrim Online was a proposition or a complaint that was old before the game came out. Even before the game came out, people were like, "Oh, I hope it's like Skyrim Online," and then the base came out, they're like, "It's not like Skyrim Online. This is a travesty," and it's the most tired and boring sentiment you can see. You even see it today. Better or worse, I follow the Elder Scrolls on Facebook because it's not a bad place to get updates on the game. Well, every bloody time they send out a goddamn update or just send out a bit of news relating to the game, near to the top poster is just like, when is Elder Scrolls 6 coming out? Why didn't you just make Skyrim Online? And I don't know where to go with that. It's just a bullshit sentiment. It's so pointless to say. Why do we need a Skyrim Online? Why the fuck do we need Skyrim Online?
Well, I suppose it would be a fantasy in many other folks' eyes, right? It's it's the dream, because Skyrim is arguably the most successful of the Elder Scrolls franchise, and therefore to make an online version of it, oh man, folks would go nuts over it. At least that's what I would imagine. Imagine that way of thinking.
But at this point, it would just be another release of Skyrim.
Yeah, essentially, with some sort of online component.
Holy shit, it could actually happen at this rate. We've already got the VR. So this E3's coming up, so we could well see Skyrim online.
Yeah, Todd is milking the no, I don't think it's actually Todd, but it could be just Bethesda itself. They're looking to milk the Skyrim train as much as possible. The Skyrim cow, excuse me. But let's scroll it back here. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but I would milk it. There's a lot of money in it. Just milk it for all it's worth, and put all that money into the Elder Scrolls Online, or put it into a new fucking engine. Put it into a new engine and produce a proper functioning game. That would be nice. That would be a novel idea.
I don't think Cinemax or Bethesda will ever get a good engine. Not judging by what we saw in like Fallout 4, I don't think so.
Not in a similar vein, will we ever see another good Elder Scrolls game?
That is the question. I would definitely say it depends on what you define as good, because usually if it comes down to it, your first Elder Scrolls game is usually your favorite.
What was your first?
My first Elder Scrolls game was Oblivion.
Yeah,
what about you?
Mine too. I went back and played Morrowind, and that was, I don't know, it was
unbearable.
It was difficult to play. I wish it had been my first, because I want to kind of feel what other people feel for Morrowind. People are rabid about Morrowind, and people are actually really chill about Oblivion. People who like Oblivion are like, yeah, that was a really nice game. People who like Morrowind are like, holy shit, you cannot beat it. You cannot beat it.
Well, here's the thing. I suppose it comes up to the difference between Morrowind and Oblivion. Oblivion is a lot more generic fantasy compared to Morrowind. Morrowind definitely had a distinctive environment. That I've heard someone call it Egyptian inspired, which I thought was really interesting.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's because they were looking at the tombs and they saw like hieroglyphics or something of that nature. But Morrowind had a more distinctive.
It's more like if the Celts or the, like, I don't know, pagans actually had a lasting civilization to return to. You know, for us to look back on, aside from Stonehenge and shit like that, if they actually managed subterranean cities, you know, like any pre-medieval society probably should have mastered by now, because they had so long to do it, and they had they didn't even have smartphones. They didn't have any excuse to procrastinate, so they should have built low, and they should have carved a lot of random glyphs into white stone pillars.
But I mean, if you also look at the way the timing of Oblivion, it comes off the release of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and that is a great boon to the fantasy genre all across the board. So I can understand when people are like, oh yeah, Oblivion's a nice game, and then you say, like Morrowind sucks, and suddenly the entire town is after you. So it is interesting. Personally, though, as weird as, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying this, I think that Skyrim would probably have to be my favorite, simply because they achieved that sweet spot between the two environments. It's not as esoteric as Morrowind, but at the same time, it's a little familiar like Oblivion. However, if they had kept the system of Oblivion, the gameplay mechanics of Oblivion, and simply improved upon it rather than streamlining it, I think they would have had a premier Elder Scrolls game. But that's just me. Anyway.
Well, I mean, Skyrim is obviously the one that I'd return to soonest. But the prospect of Skywind and beyond not beyond Skyrim and stuff like that, it really puts into perspective how, I wouldn't say lacking, but how rich the rest of the world is in comparison to Skyrim. Skyrim's got a wonderful aesthetic. It's got a great atmosphere. I'd say I have almost as much attachment to Skyrim as I did Oblivion, and that was again my first. But you see Skyrim's engine modeling stuff like the Vex City, or Dear God, I Hope Tyr in the Dres capital city, and it's just it puts into perspective how magnificent the rest of Tamriel is in comparison.
It does, and I suppose beauty is always in the eye of the beholder, and I would say that, you know, if they gave as much attention as they did with Skywind or beyond Skyrim, towards Skyrim itself, the original game, you would probably get a better version of Skyrim than, you know, what we got back in 2011. But let me ask you this question: what is it about the Elder Scrolls itself that you like so much? What keeps you glued to ESO or Oblivion or Skyrim?
Probably the writing. While, you know, you're not going to get groundbreaking stories from playing the games, and the books themselves can tell pretty archetypical stories, it's within a very tangible world that I enjoy, and I love learning new things about it. It can be a new thing relating to the Nords, the Dunmer, the Argonians. It can be any race, and I will enjoy it for what it's worth. And really, I don't know if I really need to go any deeper than that, to be honest. If the fact that I enjoy it keeps me trudging along with the shit.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But especially the Altmer stuff, I will lap up anything to do with the Altmer just because it's so. I roleplay solely Altmer, or at least Altmer, Bosmer, that kind of sphere of influence. Not necessarily due to any prescription, but just because I don't have the time to roleplay anything else. I'm attached to the Altmer now. I joined ESO to roleplay at Dunmer and tell Barney, and now that's probably one of the last things I would ever roleplay. I'm very much married to the Altmer.
You saying that though makes me think of that meme comic where it's the mother and her son, and the son's but in this situation is like, look mom, Altmer, and the mom's like, Ricky, look away while you still can, and then the kid's like, it's too late mother, I'm an Altmer, I'm here now. Ricky, well, in this case, Sarin.
That's pretty much the case. Yeah. I mean, you asked me earlier my expectations for the Elder Scrolls Online, and got to say, coming into it, they were pretty high. Not unreasonably high. I expected. I don't know what exactly I expected. I just expected a higher quality of something. It didn't need to be anything specific. It just had to be higher quality than what we got.
And you were sorely disappointed.
Yeah, well, I got to the end of the game. I leveled to what I considered max at the time, and then I think on my last quest, or at least my last zone, which I think was Reaper's March. No, it was Reaper's March, because I was Ebonheart Pact, and then you go to Daggerfall, and then you go to the Aldmeri Dominion after that. In the original circuit of the game, when the veteran ranks were a thing. Oh, it was awful. But yeah, I got to Reaper's March, which was the very last one, and I was like, right, I'm at the end. this is really shit. And then I just left the game. I left the game before finishing. And on that character, I still haven't finished the fucking game. How many years has the game been out? 4 years. 4 years the game has been out. I still haven't finished it on that character for 3-4 months. I went to places like Arcade. I went to places like, I went to Guild Wars 2 for a little bit, in fact.
Yeah, Guild Wars 2. I have a lot of things to say about Guild Wars 2.
You got a lot to say?
A lot of negative things to say, but go ahead, sorry.
Oh, really? Really? For what it's worth, I enjoy the very relaxed atmosphere there. A lot of people were very intense in Guild Wars 2. But I never felt it. I don't think I was there long enough to really get embroiled into it. And my passion for community burnt out in World of Warcraft. For better or worse, it just it dissipated. I am pretty much immune to any kind of large-scale communal drama. Individual level, I'm sure, far from immune. But just like somebody turns to me and is like, "Oh, so and so's been doing this," and I'm like, "What? All right, who gives a fuck?" Which, I mean, you say you have a lot of negative things to say about Guild Wars 2. I will say that kind of thinking is rife. It's absolutely rife in that environment. You're role playing with somebody and they turn to you and they say in whisper like, "Why are you role playing with such and such? They're bad." I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care. We're role playing plant people. I don't care. This is already a waste of my time. It's an enjoyable waste of my time, but I'm not going to prescribe too much meaning to it.
See, I can understand that, but my negative way of thinking is more about the game itself rather than, well, I suppose it is with a little bit of the community, but it's more about the game itself than what people do. Though.
Oh shit! So I just took that road by myself.
Yes, you did. Yeah, you're lucky that this podcast is more about the interviewee than it is about the interviewer. Excuse me. Wow. That being said, though, you have Guild Wars 2, you have World of Warcraft, you have ESO, you have Arcade. What other MMOs have you played?
I played Black Desert. That was a game.
That's an interesting case of a game that had a lot of hype. No, let me rephrase that. That's a game with a lot of icing and not enough cake. Yeah, that's my assessment of it. What do you think?
I think that's pretty accurate. For what it's worth, I really enjoyed the icing. I don't know how many months it took, but I quickly got stomach sick. There was too much to think about towards the end. I focused more on the interesting trade network that they had going on, and towards the end of it, it's a lot of busy work. You don't get so much pleasure from the trading aspect. You get frustrated by how inoptimal. Is that a word? Yeah. Inoptimal. That's a word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Inoptimal everything felt like. You deliver crates and crates of fish across the desert or something like that, and you get to the other end, you're like, "Oh, I could have fit another fucking crate on here if I had just done this, or if I had just paid them this little bit extra." So in the end, like, the little niggles just kind of wore me down. The roleplay community didn't really seem a great deal of traction. The only real hub that exists, the only real online engine hub that existed was ruled with an iron fist. So it kind of, anybody who would have come in with a curious, with a sense of curiosity, hopping into the scene like a little bunny, they would have looked around and they would have like raised a voice and they would have got slammed by this iron fist, and this distant on high voice would have just cried, "No, no!" And you see it in the fallout of the place. There's quite a lot of toxicity that seems to unfortunately spew from that corner of the roleplay scene. Now, I won't say anything negative about the current state. I'm only really commenting on my experience at the time, which is about 2 years old, maybe like a year and a half. Today, it may well be just a utopia, but I'm not aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
It probably locks me out.
Going back to your busy work comment, I do agree with that sentiment. A lot of it, I feel, was focused on keeping you glued to the screen for as much time as possible in order to keep you having, keep shell out more money from your wallet, essentially.
I think it was quite good about the not making you pay. It made you. There were a lot of what's it called? Cosmetic items that you could have bought. And to be honest, you could buy a lot. You could buy a lot more in that game for a lot less than you can in Elder Scrolls Online, and it did not have a subscription. So there is that. People will complain about how, as I recall, there's this ghillie suit that that inoptimal thing comes into it, where if you don't have this ghillie suit, you are not as good at PvP as everybody else. And it's like, yeah, there's a bit of a play to win aspect, but the game is £5. You can spend another £5 to optimize it, and that's where I stand. And as for a game that consumes a lot of your time and it's designed to kind of drink a lot of your time up, it's I welcome that, because games like ESO and games like World of Warcraft can oftentimes feel like glorified chat rooms, whereas you can say with Black Desert it's a similar concept, but you are doing something and you are consistently building towards bettering your character situation. You get new real estate, you get new prospects, you get a boat, you get a chariot, you get this, you get that, and there's this constant build. And it, as I understand, the game is broadening and broadening its horizons with every update, and it's just not. You look at World of Warcraft and you look at ESO, and there isn't that level of passionate expansion that you see with Black Desert Online. This is highly subjective from me, but I do feel like there is a lot of heart in Black Desert. It may be misplaced, and the game itself may be lacking in fundamental ways. Like you say, it's a lot of icing. It's a lot of fucking icing. But at the end of the day, I don't feel like ESO has much icing. I feel like there's a lot of end game content to ESO, and there's a lot of, especially for somebody who is not that into PvE. I will do it and I will enjoy it, but I exist outside of the time zone of everybody else. Obviously I'm EU based on a NA time zone mega server, so finding a group for PvE is not really the easiest thing. Well, it is actually pretty easy. So I'm talking out my arse. I'm just not that interested.
One of the things that you said is a point where we share a commonality. While you're playing on the North American server, I used to play on the Progenitor server in Star Wars: The Old Republic, which was EU based. One of the bitch of an itch of a difficulties of trying to have RP in a server that's different to yours is timing. Timing is always really hard to do.
It's a bitch.
Yeah, it is a bitch. My question to you is, why the North American server? I know that the European mega server has a smaller RP community size, sure, but what is it about the North American server that's like, yeah, I can RP here, sure?
Well, it's probably not the people. I can say that much, because the same kind of people exist on NA as they do on EU. But what I will say is that I think actually Tyrian however he chooses to name his filthy imperial character. It doesn't matter to me, because we'll just, as an Altmer role player, I am fixated on eliminating any residue of his culture from existence.
Poor Tyrion.
Yeah, poor him and his slave boy. I lost my train of thought then. I was thinking about his slave boy.
You said that the people are the same as they are in EU or NA.
Yeah, I mean, obviously EU's a smaller community on the whole, but I mentioned earlier that I left the game soon after starting it. I won't tread that topic again, but after Arcade imploded, and after I kind of gave up on Guild Wars, well, I didn't give up. I just kind of moved on. It's that kind of game. I reached out to somebody that I was familiar with from the likes of World of Warcraft and ESO EU before I left, and I was like, "Hey, I want to get back into the scene. I want to, see how ESO has developed because I'm adrift here. I don't know what I'm doing." And that was, that individual is now my wife. And at the time, she was role-playing a Veiled Heritance, or the leader of the Veiled Heritance, on the NA server. And she was just like, "Don't go to EU. It's dead." So I was like, well, I don't want to go somewhere that's dead. I'll come over to NA. I don't, hey, it's going to suck that I can't bring that max level character that I, invested so much time into when the game launched, but it's a new start. I don't really mind all that much. So basically, I came to NA for the tail.
Okay, let's get into that tail.
Wait, you really want to get into it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because in all honesty, I think it's interesting. You posted on your engine wall 3 months ago. You married an elf in Tamriel, and I find stories like that, assuming if that is one of those stories, interesting. You met your significant other in the video game.
Yeah, in World of Warcraft.
In World of Warcraft. So, would you mind talking about how'd you guys first meet, if you don't mind me asking?
What is it? Well, I had first joined the server actually. So originally, I started role playing on the Shatar EU, and unfortunately, that server it was a beautiful server, it consisting of a very tight knit community, and unfortunately, it saw a mass exodus of almost all of its guild leaders around the same time. There was something that just went through the atmosphere that caused all of us to just we were just ejected from the server like diarrhea, and we spilled all over the place, and my particular droplet landed on Argent Dawn EU. So I'm safe to say, as a dribble of diarrhea, I landed in perfect company, and I plopped onto the EU Argent Dawn server, and immediately just started playing around. I joined a guild called the Sanguine Eye, a Blood Elf guild. Based around continuing the legacy of Kael'thas Sunstrider, the Blood Elf Prince, long after he was dead. And one of my first actions, basically, I was like, okay, new server, new me. I'm gonna get out there and I'm gonna kick ass. So first thing I did was inadvertently cause a guild to collapse by my character was a spy, and I came from a server where where you could take liberties. If somebody said something in character and you heard it, then you heard it. You didn't need to ask them, "Can I hear this?" You just rolled with it. And I went to Argent Dawn EU, and my character heard a lot, and he spoke to a lot of people. And because he was new, people were very liberal with what they said to him. And then at the end of my first month, my character compiled a intelligence report on this guild, and that month, all the guilds of the server were convening for I think it's called the Conclave of 12th Alas, or Conclave of Silvermoon, or something like that. And all the guilds would get together and they just talk shop. you won't get it so much on NA because people on ESO NA because there's this, people puff up their chests and they say how terrible EP waving in roleplay is, but really at the time there's nothing better than inter-guild political roleplay when it's done to a honor code. Well, obviously new to the server, I completely bypassed this honor code, and my guild leader whipped out this intelligence report from my character, read it to everybody, and then the leadership fled the scene, promptly disbanded, and a lot of the characters died. And that was my debut. But in the midst of all this, he went around seducing various characters, men, women. He was just getting intelligence from everywhere. And that was my first roleplay scenario with Sarinteal.
Makes me think. It makes me think of in GoldenEye when James Bond is in the cab and he's like, "Yes, and be sure to pump her for information." Like, oh yes, I'll be doing a lot of pumping tonight. So
Well,
that's essentially what your character was doing.
Well, that feeds nicely into when I met my now wife. Yeah, he met her and he pumped her for information. He pumped the shit out of her. And ever since then, we've been vague friends. I'd say even today we're vague friends, continuing the trend. And so, where was I? Yeah, he pumped her for information. We became distant friends, I suppose. We didn't roleplay very much, but we were aware of one another from then on. And years down the line, my wife left for Guild Wars 2. Oh, I didn't follow. Everybody was going to Guild Wars 2 at the time, and I popped into it for a very brief stint, but I was still very much in love with WoW, even though the game, Guild Wars 2 was such a breath of fresh air. But I met a friend of mine there, and he, one of the first things he said to me was like, "Oh, you're in the game. Well, Fair Varen will be very, very pleased to hear that." And I was like, "Who the fuck is Fair Varen?" He's like, well, she's been asking after you." Like, I told her that you were in the game, and she was just overjoyed. I was like, who is this person to be overjoyed by me? And don't get me wrong, I've had my fair share of fangirls in the past. Those days are behind me, but
You sound like one of those retired pop stars. Like, those days are behind me. I don't have fangirls anymore.
I'm sure I do have fangirls. They're out there, but they won't admit it. They'll never admit it. They'll tell themselves that they're repulsed by my arrogance. But I know the truth. And I was like, okay, cool. And I didn't really talk to her. I was like, okay, that's weird. And then I carried on with my day. A nicer person would have said, hey, Fair Varen, I remember you, even though I don't. It's nice to talk to you again. But I didn't do that. And then another 2 years passed, and we both kind of ended up in ESO together. And then we started talking, and we rolled back around to me leaving the game and then returning to it and finding her there. So it's basically been about, we've crossed paths many times, and this time the latest time we crossed paths, I said that she was pretty hot. I said that, she was very attractive, she was a very lovely lady, and apparently that did the trick.
Okay. Well, that's definitely hashtag relationship goals right there, for sure.
It is, yeah. It wasn't all kind of like sordid online sweaty meetings. It was not long after that we met up in London.
Yeah, because London is the perfect place to meet.
It's all right actually, because it's quite a nice place to meet, because you're forced to collaborate to get around. Because the underground, it's not that bad of a system. But if you're not familiar with it, if your primary interaction with like advanced guidance is the odd sign that says Cockermouth in 10 miles, you're not used to to all these multiple coloured lines crisscrossing this way and that. But that's a story for the riverbank, really. After meeting in London, we went away. She went back to wherever she came from, and I went back to my lovely home in the hills. And we kept in contact, and then we eventually decided that, you know what, it was really nice weekend spent together in London, and we should live together. So we ended up living together. That Christmas I went to Vienna to see her. 3 months later, after that, she moved back to England, and then ever since then, it's been a mad dash to try and find a place to live. And now we've got a nice home together. We've got 2 cats that are kind of slumbering by the microphone, and we're drinking cider, reminiscing about good old roleplay times.
It sounds like things have finally calmed down for you after all that. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, there's always something to do. There's always something up in the air.
Well, that's how those things generally work, those relationship things. I have no idea what you guys, I don't know anything about relationships, but hey, you know what? If you guys want to tie yourselves down to...
that's a minor aspect. The fact that you get tired of one another is kind of like... The fact that you get tired of one another and you can still tolerate one another and enjoy being at odds.
Well, it makes me think of this remark I heard from this professor by the name of Jordan Peterson, and that name might raise some alarms for some folks, but anyway, he was...
Am I conversing with a Nazi right now?
No, you're conversing with someone worse, a person that has an open mind, kind of, maybe.
Then I'm out of my element completely.
But he argues that one of the interesting things about marriage is that it's competitive as much as cooperative. So when you say that there are points where like you can't really, it's just stoop to toleration, I definitely sense the sort of competitiveness there anyway.
Well, it's not really much of a competition because I win every arm wrestle these days. No,
that sounds like it took a lot of effort to get to that point.
Oh yeah, she was strong. God, she was strong then. No, I don't know really. It is just like living with your best friend. It's as simple as that. And I think if I actually lived with my best friends, I would not enjoy it nearly as much as I do living with my wife. That's the differing.
That's so nice.
He's so nice.
I know.
Oh.
Well, I do hope that, you guys have a happy married life and enjoy each other's company until you're old and gray and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
As pretentious as all that sounds. But no, I do like to hear these types of stories, and it is interesting.
It's nice in that as much as like I may rag on Elder Scrolls, and I may rag on role players, I may rag on roleplay in general as it's a massive black hole of effort. I will say that, but it's an effort and it's a labor of love, and this metaphor is going nowhere.
Yeah, I was like, wait, he went from marriage to roleplay to labor of
to
love.
A black hole.
To a black hole.
Marriage is like an all-consuming black hole of effort, right? You just keep pouring into it, and one of these days you'll die.
That is possibly the best version of the truth that I've heard in a long while. So the moral of the story is, if you don't want your life to be tied down to a black hole, don't get married. I like that.
Precisely, yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
But I mean, with my own guild will accuse me of having an ego, and
so speaking of guilds and RP, then let's just move on into the meat and potatoes of this here conversation.
Yes.
you play an Altmer. You play two Altmers, actually, primarily. Well, I gotta say, they're very foreign to me. I don't know. I only know the bare bones. That's as much as I know. I know that they one of the foundation of the words, Jesus. The foundation of their society is ancestor worship. They're striving to get back to that natural Anuic state of being back before Shore went and ruined everything. I say Shore, I meant to say Lorcan, excuse me.
Yeah, how dare you?
I also know that they strive for perfection in all things, which I find is interesting because perfection is an illusion. So, therefore, their quest may be argued as an illusion, but I'm sure you have an opinion on that as well.
Is it an illusion? I mean, in the Elder Scrolls Online, is it an illusion? You have creatures like Jigalak, who I suppose, well, that's not perfection, is it? That's stasis. Yeah, ignore that. Yeah, this pathway to perfection, it's actually been given a name as of the Summerset chapter. It's called the Path of Alaxon, and it is basically, as you say, the pathway to perfection.
Well, I mean, where I'm going with all this is that my character, whenever I roleplay with him, he's very suspicious of the Altmer Dominion. They're Elven supremacists in his eyes. They're not racist. They don't want to eradicate everybody, but supremacy is something that he's a little wary of. And unfortunately, this stems from my fault as a person, that it kind of extended OCly, and I'm just like, wow, really? Come on, they have their own merits to their society just as much as every race. So the question that I have for you is, why Altmer? What is it about the Altmer that attracted you from Dunmer?
Because it's a flavor. it's a flavor of writing. It's a flavor of it's a society that you don't see a great deal of in, well, certainly pop culture. As close to pop culture as the Elder Scrolls may or may not be. It's showcasing a very conservative, very traditional, very, well, let's say, right-wing, ages past outlook on the world that is normally vilified. And I find that enthralling because it's a story that's almost never told, or it's never told in a way that's as nuanced as the Altmer are. So yeah, definitely you get the likes of the fourth era Falmor. They want to just unmake the Mundus. They want to go back to a state of unbeing, I suppose, or into a state of their original just floating energies, I suppose, is the straightforward way of putting it. They want to reascend back to their divine state. And you've latched onto that as well. You've said, as I understand, all Altmer want to get into this position, and it's not. Well, yes, that's true. It's not the whole truth. As united as they may want to appear as a people, they are not of the same mind. Yes, predominantly they will search for superiority and quote unquote perfection in their craft. It's ingrained into them to excel and do better, as unrealistic as that may be, and as oftentimes damaging as that may be by our standards. The the quality or the direction of that perfection can vary from character to character, or rather, from person to person, in the same way it can from any race. You saying to me that an Altmer wants to reach perfection is like me saying every Nord wants to fight and drink and go to, what the fuck's it called? Holy shit.
Sovngarde.
Sovngarde. Yeah. While it's, true, while, every Nord in their mind would probably be like, yeah, that sounds cool. It's not the be all and end all. And let me just gather my thoughts for a moment. You'll see it a lot in the upcoming chapter that Summerset is split between the pro-Iren movement, or the people who are following the Aldmeri Dominion and welcoming, even if it's begrudgingly, of her decree, and the people who are very much not. And both are allowed to speak. Iren herself, Razandar himself says that Iren encourages discord among the Altmer. There are people allowed to speak up, and people are allowed to say, no, I don't think this is right, to an extent. There is the matter of the secret police in the form of the Eyes of the Queen in operation. But by and large, they are not of one mind. As I've said, they're not of a single mind. Perfection to an Altmer can range from, let me just think. It can range from the recapturing of White Gold Tower and the return of the Merithic era beneath a benign rulership, or supposedly benign rulership, where the Goldmer's burden weighs heavy on the shoulders of the Altmer, while all the lesser races enjoy the peace and prosperity granted to them by their betters. And that would be a return to the Aldmeri state of mind. Like, everyone is unified, everybody is at peace, everybody is, again, of one mind. And another person might turn around in the fourth era and say, actually, that's not perfection. Perfection is doing that, capturing White Gold Tower, smashing White Gold Tower and the rest of the towers, allowing all those people beneath us to suffocate beneath the weight of our oppression, or, well, the weight of our great sovereignty. And they will all die, and we will all ascend, and this world will be no more, and we will be perfect. So it's a matter of the realistic perfection, in the sense of peace and prosperity and getting along. The taxes are just right, and your local magistrate is a fair ruler. Or there's the unrealistic, or rather spiritual, as opposed to mundane, perfection of there are no taxes. There is no fair magistrate. You are just a ball of positive energy. Now, in my mind, a few times over, I've explained that far better than I just have. But hopefully that gets across at the very least, two different mindsets of the Altmer, or rather two different measures of the extreme. At the other end of the spectrum, because that's kind of like a pro-Iren, Thalmor, Dominion mindset. On the other end, it's about it's not about pursuing the past, it's about collecting the past, and it's about securing it, and it's about containing themselves within this island that they've built, this paradise, this Summerset. You don't bother us, we don't bother you. We get to just keep pursuing whatever we want, and you get to keep pursuing whatever you want. Just so happens what you want is a pathway to destruction and ruin, and you are just going to die out. And we don't care because we're going in that direction the other way.
What I'm reading for you and from what I've read, it seems more of that they want that stasis above all else seems to be the goal, be it through whichever way of means of perfection that they want to go to, as you outlined. My rebuttal to that is more of you can't really have that, not when you have the two overarching forces of Anu and Padome at an interplay of each other. It's essentially it's essentially moving forward no matter what you do. And therefore to go ahead and pursue perfection by whatever means is to essentially try and search for every flaw within whatever you're doing. And because flawlessness is I would argue an unattainable state, save for, I guess, Chim, but that's another can of worms altogether. It seems like something that is almost alien to me, if that makes sense. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that, I suppose.
It is alien, and the Altmer, part of the reason I like them is that they are prior to the Summerset chapter, they are kind of showcased as the other in capital O. They are something else. They are not us. And on top of that, you say that it's not necessary. It may well not be reasonable. It may not even be possible to achieve this idea of perfection, of flawlessness. And I would say, no, probably not. They're tarnished at the Altmer, and they only grow more and more tarnished and bitter.
Tarnished and bitter. Kind of describes the ending of this installment, I'm afraid. Well, folks, we're going to have to end the first installment here, but don't worry, next week, July 17th, we'll be back with the second installment. The second installment will be looking at least 2+ hours where we get really deep into the meat and potatoes. So, we'll be seeing you until then. This is your friendly neighborhood commentator signing off. As corny of an outro that was.